Hello and welcome to the Product Opscast with Graham Reed and Antonia Landy. Welcome, Antonia. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Fantastic. Today we are joined by Timo, data consultant, author, and founder of Base Signal. Timo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Take a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself and your background.
Okay, so quick. I have a product history. I spent almost 8 years in product roles. So worked at a lot of startups, also worked at Audible, Amazon. I was doing different kind of business models from a product perspective. I still say that product is my first love, and still I would say my deepest love. And it also it hurts a lot, like all the scars that I took away of working in product. One of the reasons why I basically, emigrated, or not maybe immigrated to data. Is like one of the reasons, because I was so frustrated in the product space that I picked something that I thought is more rational, is more reasonable, and which is like the data space. So this is where I spend, I would say, the last 10 years of my professional career as a mostly solo consultant, and now also starting to build products again, like I'm rediscovering my old love. And so what I usually do is I work a lot with companies in different stages to improve their product analytics or product measurement in general. In the last year, mostly also trying to bridge more things to bring marketing data, product data, and revenue data together, because this might be a part where we talk about, because product data by itself, I won't say it's useless, but it's definitely missing a very important ingredient. This is okay, does it actually make any kind of impact or not? So this is something which I do. I work a lot on data warehouse setups for that, because at some point you realize that you have to go beyond the existing tools that a lot of people are using, because the use cases are just different, and then you need to combine different data. Spend also a decent amount of time to work on data modeling for product data, which is not an obvious thing to come by. That's my short history of how I get here.
Thank you. And I can certainly tell that you've had that product management, product background, like you said, the scars that that's left on you. I think we can all attest to that for sure. Our topic today is, exactly as you really described. It's about bridging that gap between product data and the wider business as well, and how we might facilitate that as successfully as product professionals. To kick off, Antonio, I'd like to come to you first, really to kind of expand upon our topic today and where you've seen this gap, in your career, and particularly within product operations.
Honestly, I've seen it in nearly every organization I've worked in, every organization I have consulted for, every organization I see through the lens of my coaches. Data is something that everybody knows it's important. And if you ask any leader of any product org whether they use data to make decisions, they go oh yeah, of course we use data. We have lots and lots of data. Look at all of this data we have, right? But then when you actually speak to the product managers, and it's when was the last time you looked at this dashboard, right? When was the last time you looked at this dashboard and made a decision, or had data meaningfully influence the way you did discovery, or the way you maybe positioned the features, how you talk about them? Then it starts becoming a very, very different story. Now, for me in consulting and coaching, the two biggest things I've seen in the last year and a half, 2 years, are two things: the utilization of data, or let's say information, if we want to be a little bit more broad, and the connection of product strategy to the day-to-day work, which is also a data topic in disguise, right? So many times I hear or I see organizations saying, oh yeah, we do OKRs. We have a quarterly cadence. It's fantastic. We get everybody in a room together. We do a lot of pre-planning. We do the actual planning. Everybody knows what the OKRs are, but it's a thought experiment, because they don't actually have the concrete measurements to back up whether they've actually reached their key results or not, right? Whether they can actually quantify that objective. So I've actually been in this kind of data adjacent milieu for a few years now, sometimes going pretty deeply in creating those dashboards, those internal tools with data partners, right? And I think that's where product ops especially can be a fantastic bridge to say, I understand how the product managers work. I understand the shortcomings there. I understand what they would need and how they would need to be exposed to data, to information to make it useful to them. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been talking about this a lot. And Timo, like, I absolutely adore your newsletter, especially because it's just, I feel like a lot of the time, these deep data topics like data warehouses, we're talking about semantics or connecting different layers of data into one thing. They can get fairly complex and complicated very quick. But you managed to talk about it in a way that it's not scary, even for a non-native data person. So selfishly, I wanted us to publicly talk about this, but I think it shows up everywhere. And if we in product ops are truly on a mission to empower our product managers in the product organization to build better products, then data is something we need to seriously keep talking about.
That's perfect. I mean, this is the reason why I like to talk to Antonia from time to time, because she ticks all the boxes, especially the one with the strategy one. I think this is something we should cover in this session, because I think this is a real big missed opportunity that I, for example, also missed for too many years, I would say, because it can help a lot data teams.
Let's carry on down that thread. Let's talk about the strategy. Let's talk about that.
I think the interesting thing is this often doesn't really come from the product team itself. So this is something that I discovered, I would say, over the last 1.5 years when I was working more closely with data teams. And so I would love to bring the perspective for data teams here in here as well, because like they have their own perspective on this thing. And so this is the problem. Like there's a lot of frustration on both sides about the data topic, because like these are two very different type of teams who sometimes I feel have a really hard time to talk to each other. Often like even harder than, for example, marketing, because marketing is, when a data perspective, much more straightforward. So like you have a clear conversion funnel, you have clear goals where you want to optimize to. So this is something the data team can understand quite quickly, and also marketing team understands well enough so that they find a common ground. If you try this in a product, let's say in a product setup, it's much harder, because like there's no clear definition of success. So one thing that when I was working with data teams in the last year was, we found out when we become a lot better to identify what is the strategic direction of that the company is doing, that the product is doing, we can craft insights into the application and the progress of the strategy that for the first time we got a lot of attention of people. This is something that doesn't come natural for data teams. So data teams are usually on the receiving end, so they get these nice tickets with, hey, I need a dashboard of blah, 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 and so on. Like you can fill a whole evening of data persons in a pub to complain about these things. But obviously, like the hard thing is like, how do you turn it into something proactively? And one thing which makes a real difference is when you spend some time, let's say, with the management team and then with the product team to understand where they're actually pushing for the next 6 months. Because every product, so I assume now, every product has a strategic direction. So let's hope so. I guess, okay, let's just say
most of the time.
It happens that it has a strategic direction. The interesting thing is, as Antonio already said, is obviously everyone would be very interested to see how we're actually progressing in this strategic direction. So let's say what everyone does right now, hey, we introduce new AI features because we all believe that this is whatever. But the interesting thing, obviously, is like, how does it actually catching on? So first of all, do these features get adopted? This is something that these people are very interested in. Then obviously, we want to take the next step. We want to say, okay, when someone is adopting this stuff, do we see some indicators that they perform better on some core metrics like retention or conversion into revenue on something like this? So if you as a data, and then in combination with the product team, can provide these things, you are basically in the top spot in the company, because you actually give daily feedback, weekly feedback on strategy progress. And you can help like saying, look, we really have an issue here. So we get people to trying out these new features, but it doesn't seem to stick. We have to go back, and then we come back to the point where we say, okay, now it actually makes sense because now we can influence how we want to work on stuff because we get some actually data feedback, which I totally agree. Everyone says, because this is basically playbook. Yes, we use a lot of data. We do a lot of data-based or whatever decisions in product, but it never happens. And I don't blame anyone to, because like it's super hard to do this because like you have to find the right kind of abstraction level, collect some useful metrics, and then you can use them to actually say, oh, maybe we should improve a little bit here in the next 6 weeks. And then we have a look at how this develops. So therefore, like, honestly, I was avoiding strategy and strategic stuff for such a long time because like I'm a classic hands-on keyword type of person. So I like the engineering lifestyle, so where you just basically implement stuff and so on. But I definitely discovered the value of strategy and understanding strategy over the last 2 years. And it can make things so much easier because you frame things just differently when you have an idea about that.
Wow, so much to dive into there. But one of the things as I was listening to that, which was brilliant, to be honest. You said that kind of the data teams are on the receiving end, and a lot of what you kind of explored there is, I wouldn't say that they're not necessarily lagging indicators or lagging information, but there's certainly kind of information and data and analysis that's post a kind of a strategy. It's more to prove the strategy was correct, prove the success. Where does you see, where should data hit before the strategy comes along as well? How should the strategy start to be defined in the first place by good research, good data, and to help influence that? Because otherwise, we're taking a real punt and waiting for the data to prove that we were right or wrong, rather than actually being kind of much more led by good data in the first place.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think the problem is what you describe as basically level 98. And unfortunately, you don't start a game at level 98.
True.
So, or you don't play Civilization on DT level or whatever. So like you can't. So you have to start somewhere where you actually become comfortable.
We might need to explain that for some of our younger audience.
No, I think Civilization is still going strong across generations. So at least like I still meet younger people than me who's still playing this. So, but no, I think the interesting thing is like, yes, obviously, this would be great if you, let's say you do quarterly strategy check-ins and you invite the data team as one of the teams that can provide a specific angle to this. But I think you have to get to a position that you actually can do it. So you have to have a really strong metric set to do this. So you have to have a good understanding how you measure product performance, because it doesn't help you when you say someone, oh yeah, we had 70% adopted the feature. So obviously it's still better than saying, yeah, we had 20,000 people clicking this button, which is often like the state of product analytics. So, but obviously you have to have some, let's say, some more meaningful metrics that tell you something about product performance. I think one thing, if you don't have this, and let's say this might be the initial step, is why you can invite data or the analytics team to these kind of meetings is what we can do is we can understand, first of all, we understand where you want to go. One of the biggest issues that data team often have is they don't have the right context to help, because we focus on a lot. We love engineering. So we love to focus on engineering problems because this is what we fully understand. We have the full context there. And it's fun, honestly, but often it goes somewhere where it doesn't provide any business value. So this is a bit of the downside of the things. What the big problem is, like the big gap is like the context. So when you invite analysts and data people early on to the strategic meeting, it's like you basically fill up with the right kind of context. How this plays out is how they start to analyze things. So they will check different data sets. They will look if specific data is missing. And this, for example, is a real opportunity. So when you start to plan initiatives or do strategic decisions, when you get someone from the data team, it's like they can understand what you're planning to do, and they can then transfer this to what do we actually have setup wise, or do we maybe have to do some proxy stuff? As someone since I have a product background, something that I often do is when I'm in this meeting is saying, look, we can do this analysis, but what we are aiming right now, we won't get this kind of context data. So maybe we can extend our product experience slightly, that we can collect other data points, because this will help us to, in the end, calculate better metrics. So it could be, for example, why don't we ask during onboarding this one question? Because this one question will help us to segment people much better. So for example, we could ask people, hey, do you have experience with AI features yet? Or did you test it in other things? So then we can group people in different kind of buckets, because it will help us to make a more meaningful analysis later on. Because we might already have an idea how we can segment the kind of data. And so if you invite data people early, they can come up with these kind of questions, these kind of ideas early on, before we come to the level where you can say, okay, based on our data that we have collected so far, maybe we should look in direction 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah. I mean, this is really, like you said, I think this is level 98 stuff. For me, where it starts, and this is something you mentioned, right? Product performance. I want to know if your product is performing, what does that look like? What numbers are going up? What does good behavior in your product look like? And how do you quantify that? And so often that foundational understanding of how are people navigating through our product, our app, or service? What markers of successful adoption are there? What do we quantify? How do we quantify that? That's not even there, right? And that's where it comes back to that frustration of like, yeah, look at all of the data we have. And like, fantastic. Where's the context, right? How do you connect all of those data points? How do you make it useful for the people actually absorbing that data? And I do really feel for data teams, because I think no other discipline has been so shunned by product. Like, the fact that data teams are not in strategy meetings is absolutely flabbergasting. Like, they are part of your like the engineers are in there, right? The designers
They
are
also
in
had
there.
to fight for it. So it's like,
Yeah.
they just had a
Why?
longer way to go. So, but yeah, true.
Exactly. But I think even at the basic layer, and this is something I often do with companies, what does product performance look like, and what does product health look like? And that's level 0. That's where you need to start.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think, and you already said it, like everyone who's listening, ask yourself, can you tell product performance? So can you tell how well is your product performing? So obviously, like, you might have the follow question, how do you define performance? And then we are like, okay, now we're getting started. So this is actually like, you have to have a clear idea how you can answer this question. So how does product performance look like? And then, of course, this at some point will connect you to some kind of revenue. If you, let's say, a commercial product. If you're not, then it connects to something else that you want to achieve. And you're right. So this is actually the foundation that you need. And it's a hard foundation to achieve. I don't know. How do you approach this usually, like when you work with these teams to get an understanding how performance could look like or could be measured?
So something I found useful is framing it in a jobs to be done kind of way. So ultimately, what do you want your customer to achieve through the usage of your product? And then you kind of work backwards from there, right? Like, how might we quantify that successful action or successful habit on the side of the customer? But it turns quite philosophical and quite strategic as well very quickly. Let's say you are a fitness app, right? You're assuming that people might want to get healthier. Maybe they want to eat better. And then you really, really have to ask yourself, what does that look like in the app? And what assumptions are we making as well with the data points we are collecting? And I think that's something that we gloss over so readily, right? If we assume that people starting a workout means they've become healthier, it's a kind of logical assumption, but it's assumption nevertheless, right? And then you go back to this question of, okay, do we want them to log their weight? If we want them to log their weight, maybe not everybody's goal is weight loss. So do we ask them about their goal, and do we track against that? So it's very multifaceted once you start sort of scraping the surface a little bit.
I think it's good. And I do it quite similarly. So I also use, we're both like jobs to be done. So therefore I'll use a similar thing. one thing that I usually then do, I take this and translate it up into some metrics that we can measure up, and so that we can actually do what you just said. But I think you said the most important thing is, and I think this is what makes a lot of teams struggle. For a lot of teams, this is a checklist item, potentially. Like when they hear about, okay, we have to understand what does active user actually mean. So it's a checkbox item that well, we have to sit together. Okay, let's define what. I mean, at least this is a progress. A lot of people just take an active user metric out of the tools that they have and just say, okay, let's run with that. But the problem is, it's an ongoing process of refinement, understanding, and also like counter checking. Okay, let's say we have this definition now of maybe these 3 active states where we say, okay, look, we have one active number, but this can be broken down into 3 active states because we have 3 different, very different personas who are using the app who want to achieve very different goals. So this is already really cool when you have it. But in the end, like what you need is like you have to revisit, I would say, at least 2 times a year to see if this is actually still true, because you will get a lot of input materials. You will still do user interviews. You will look at some data that basically represent that. So like, okay, how many of these personas are we actually getting into the tool? How many of them stay active? So then you can come together and can say, okay, is our definition still okay? Or maybe do we have to refine it? So this is like why I always love and always bring up then John Cutler's North Star metric example, because like he was one of the first one who said, this is an ongoing iteration process of very fuzzy definitions that are never right at any point of time. So it's a little bit like, I don't know, quantum theory of product, because like you don't know if it could be a state of customer success or not. But I think the whole dialogue around this already makes it so valuable. And then obviously like define something, measure it, get some metrics out of it. So let's say have like my favorite example is always like have an activation rate. So get an understanding in this beautiful window of opportunity that you have when someone creates a new account in your app or in your B2B product. Now your time is ticking. So you have 48 hours or maximum 7 days to convince them that you are something with potential for the future. And you can formulate this in an activation rate, because you can say, okay, people should get there. Everyone who gets there, we then divide by all new accounts, and then we have an activation rate. And this is something you can optimize and revisit all the time. You can say, okay, look, we are here. But obviously, you also have to define the definition or refine the definition all the time, because also activation might change. Marketing basically ran out of people creating new accounts, because like you have your initial audience that works really well, and then comes the nasty thing where you say, oh, we have to expand. So expansion also means, first of all, marketing has to find different people. Second of all, they come with different prerequisites and also with different goals into your app. And so then your activation is shifting. So this is why it's an ongoing process. Honestly, if you're really invested in it, it's a super fun process. So I still think these are the most valuable meetings that you can have, also because they're super interdisciplinary. So you can bring data people in there. You can bring customer success. You can bring in growth. You can bring in engineering. And even when everyone has slightly different kind of angles, so this usually like when I do this kind of workshops where we do these things, there's always something coming out which is better than what you had before. And at least like gives a good iteration. So it's a good point to say that.
For newer people that are coming into this, some of our audience that may be fairly new, that getting their teeth into data a little bit more, it's probably important to call out that, the same metrics are not the same across every business. The same metrics, even the same types of business. Piece here, and the question to you is, to both of you is, should we all be looking at what are the right metrics for our business actually are, not just assuming that monthly active users, daily active users, etc., are the ones that we should be measuring against? Is there anything that is universal, and should there be anything that is universal in this space?
You want to go first or should I go first?
I think there are some basic metrics that are good to have. Like everybody's interested in how much revenue you're making a month, right? Everybody's interested in how much money it takes to acquire a new user, for example. I think the usefulness of those metrics changes over the lifetime and the life cycle of a company. So I think that's the importance of a given set of metrics changes over time. And I think that's that evolution, because it has to change with your strategy as well. If you're a scrappy startup, all you're interested in is getting product market fit and proving that your product actually is useful to a given number of people. right? So those sort of foundational basic metrics are very useful in that point in time. But especially as you evolve, and as Timo mentioned, especially as you expand, you learn more about the people that are actually using your product and how they are using it. Or, you refine that aha moment, and that is useful for your activation rate. And you can then say, yes, this set of people become loyal, become retained users, then that's probably the kind of dashboard you'll be looking at for those 6 months, 9 months as you go through those iterations. So I think those, quote unquote, basic foundational metrics will always be there, but their importance shifts over time.
But that's the key, isn't it? Is that if you take a snapshot in time at the life cycle of a business, different metrics will be important. You mentioned revenue. Actually, like in your scrappy startups, OpenAI, for example, when we're not charging anything and we're not getting any money. So actually, was revenue important for them right at the very, very start of that?
I would counter that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please do.
So I think the important thing I think there's a tendency to say that, and I think there is also there's a valid point to say this. Still, revenue is the one best metric to validate your business product or your product at all. Like if you have a commercial product and people not show any kind of interest in paying for this thing, then it's a great product, but it's not something that you can sustain over time. Even when you have the strategy that you will not break even. So I think this is a valid one. I mean, like Amazon, best example for this. OpenAI, this is a classic startup one. So you won't break even because you say, okay, it's fine. We reinvest stuff into distribution or other things, but you want to have revenue signals to tell you, okay, people are really invested. So I would not, I'm someone who says you should look at this very early on, even when you're a scrappy startup, because this is a classic test that you say, okay, look, I have this kind of idea. Are you willing to give me $50 so that I will build it and I will basically onboard you? So obviously this is a lot stronger than asking someone, hey, do you like it? Would you sign up? Yeah. So if people pay is still the final thing to go to. So therefore, yeah. But in general, you're right. Yeah.
It's a great point. I think there is that piece there of the importance of those metrics at the different stages of the business, of the product.
Yes.
But that's what you said there is a valid point. Is that those key metrics should still be calculated, should be still looked at, should still be analysed, regardless of the importance of them. At those different stages, that some will become important later, or some will become less important later.
Exactly. I think this is the important part. So you might measure revenue, but you will not obsess about it because you say, okay, it's an early signal. We want to understand how people are going for, but it's not like the top thing that you look into. And so I think this is the important thing to know. So to your original question, I think you always should work with standardized metrics, but the thing in product is it's how you define them. So every product has an activation rate. For every product activation, the definition of activation, that is basically the baseline of this metric, looks different. Even for yourself, it might look different over time. So you might start with this definition of the metric and it will evolve to some degree. And I think this is the important thing. Metrics need context. So a metric without context is completely useless. So this is the tricky thing. Like you're on LinkedIn, like someone says, hey, these are the best 200 software as a service metrics that you should care about. I don't say it's bad. It's a good starting point, but they don't work for you because you don't put them into context. So as you said, you don't make a decision which is important for us right now. You also don't make a decision what are output metrics and what are input metrics. So just maybe for the audience, output metrics is a result of something. Like revenue is a classic output metric. So there is no way you can directly influence revenue. If you can, you have a business model that you can get so much investment for that, I don't know. So in general, you do stuff and then revenue happens. But what you are looking for is input metrics. So for example, new accounts could be an input metric because this is something that marketing can actively push for. Or let's say activated users or activation rate is also more an input metric because this is something where you as a product team can actively work with. So you can get better in understanding what are actually the jobs that people want to do in the product. You can create onboarding a little bit better. You can set people more better up for success, and then you can change this. Then obviously, like if you get better at activating people, it will have an impact on revenue, and you want to understand the impact, but you cannot directly change revenue. So this is another thing which is important. So sometimes I don't know how it is for you, but I still get cringe moments when I ask people and say, yeah, our North Star metrics is total MRR. I was like, this is not a North Star metric. This is obviously, this is an important business metric, mostly for your CFO, also a little bit for you, but it's an output metric. You can influence it, and it has nothing to do with user value, which North Star metric should incorporate. So North Star metric should show if you can generate value for your users, and then obviously you want to capture the value, and then this is where you bring in the revenue metrics. But
so interesting. So we've talked, I think, a fair amount about product and data. I think something that gets almost no limelight in the product space is product marketing and data. How can we, Timo, maybe give us a quick intro to what you do in terms of connecting the three?
Okay, so now we need to extend the time. I mean, in the end, this is the ultimate goal, because I think so. Let me describe the situation when it's all working, so that people can imagine that it's worth trying to get this up and working. So I think the interesting thing is when you get the marketing data and the product data and the revenue data together, is that you can discover these specific combination of, let's say, audience attributes, or call it microsegment, or however you want to call it, that perform really well. So they are really good in converting into new subscriptions and so on. So the interesting thing is, like, what you want to find there is, you want to find a combination of specific product marketing initiatives that work really well. So maybe you find that a specific webinar that you run every second month brings in people who, by your numbers, seem to perform 5% better than someone else, which is nice, because now you can play it back to product marketing and say, look, when we run this kind of audience through this kind of webinar, it looks like we are setting them up for more success than the other ones. So again, this is hypothesis, so we have to see if we can scale it up. But the interesting thing is when you find these combinations where marketing can say, well, that's cool, because this is something where we can just throw a lot more money on it and it will grow. This is the tricky thing with marketing. So you might have specific audiences like all founders' friends or something like this that just doesn't scale. So like they might perform really well. I mean, everyone knows this in product, like early adopters, super great, high, like super fans and so on. But obviously they don't grow when you just put 10,000 more into Google Ads. So like you won't find them. So you find something else. So the interesting thing is when you bring it all together, you can find for these combination of, let's say, specific marketing sources, then also like specific criteria about them. This is why onboarding and asking people during onboarding is so important, that you collect zero-party data, how we call it. I still don't know why, but anyway. So that you collect this kind of information, because this gives you this really great insight that you can then play back to marketing and say, look, it looks like this combination of people, like they come from this source, they are in touch with this kind of asset that we do in marketing. They give us this industry information and they give us this company size. They start on this plan. They seem to perform 10% better than someone else. And then marketing can go in and can say, okay, cool, I get you 1,000 more of these. Not a problem. And this makes it so powerful. So the tricky thing, obviously, is like the nasty thing that you have to build underground to basically get there. So like, yeah, you have to, I think first thing, this is also like why it's not something when you just get started, like the scrappy startup, it's a bit hard to do. I mean, there are other ways how you can do this, but you need to have a warehouse. So you need to have a data warehouse where you bring it together, because like you want to bring the marketing data sources, the product data sources, and the revenue data sources together. You want to unify it. You need identity resolution so that you can match this all up. Then you need some kind of attribution approach, because like people will get exposed to a lot of things, especially in B2B, like 6 months journey before they actually start to create a free test account and do stuff. So you have to have a strategy how you bake this all in. But once you have this in place, it can give you really interesting insights. And the second thing, which is interesting for product marketing, which is often overlooked and you can achieve faster, is let's take my example from before, like activation rate. You can create proxy metrics that you can give marketing that is beyond just account created, but that gives you a signal on potential future success. So marketing needs fast feedback. So if they're running any kind of advertisement campaigns, advertisement platforms don't want to wait 6 months while you attribute a conversion to them. So usually they forget about this user completely and you cannot attribute it back. So if they want to optimize their Google ads or Meta ads or anything else, they need to get very fast signals back. And so this is something that if you're really getting good in understanding performance, especially early performance of new accounts coming in, you can signal this back very quickly after, let's say, 24 hours, 48 hours to the advertising platform or to marketing, and then they can optimize all the stuff that they are doing. So when these two, let's say, when product also, or let's say when product analysts and marketing analysts really work together, they can create this really great setups that can unlock use cases that are usually not available for a lot of them.
Yeah, I love it. This is quite advanced stuff. I think in
Yes.
many organizations, we're still just trying to figure out how to work with data and how to work with product marketing. But once you unlock that and you center all of these groups around value, right? And I think that's the most important part. To a certain extent, this also makes it so painfully obvious as to why we all need to have the same definitions
Yeah.
of what success look like, of what a successful user is, of even the given attributes, right? We all need to speak the same language. We all need to come around a table with these common, not just metrics, but common words, common definitions for what we're actually trying to do in any given quarter, in any given month. And I love that you mentioned, right? Product marketing works at a different pace.
Yes.
They need fast feedback. They need to know exactly which levers to pull when. And in product, we can empower them to do that, but we very rarely do. Very,
Yeah.
very rarely.
I just got one thought, and it's an early thought because I just like, I think I was thinking a little bit about this before, but I think one thing that I would love to see in product teams is that they just become more competitive and more performant oriented, which is a hard thing to do. I mean, obviously, we try to improve user experience. It takes time and it takes a lot of experience. But on the other hand, I don't like it when a product team accepts that they just get 10% activated. And I sat in these meetings. They were like, oh yeah, get 10% activated. That's quite good. I was like, no, I mean, you should aim for 20%. And so it's like, you really should, I think in all the times, like you should take someone who doesn't understand your product, you should take it personal. Obviously, just to some degree, because would go crazy. You cannot make everyone happy. I think that is true. But I think you should develop this urge to understand why are we losing these people? Why are we not getting into? And you can come to the point where you say, we get people in our product that are not a fit. But this is a super valuable learning as well, because this is something you can also feedback to product marketing and say, look, that's interesting, but when we get these people with these kind of budgets in our product, that doesn't work. And we have to accept it for now. We can make a strategic, so to circle back to the other thing, we can make a strategic decision at some point where we say, we really want to focus on them, but right now we see with the data, they just don't work for us. And so, yeah, I think this is like what I really want to get people into. Like, see it as a game. Like you want to push harder.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting piece that Tony, you starting to allude to a little bit as well. In fact, both of you were. Is if we've talked a huge amount about kind of the usefulness of the data and setting it up, etc., having those right conversations. I think a piece as well is making sure that the right people are in the room, bringing the right people together. Very traditionally, particularly over kind of, I'd say probably the last 10 years, we've had this kind of product squad mentality of product managers and design and engineers and, data, product marketing, user research, and I've not been given that seat at the table of that metaphorical table. I've certainly seen this changing. It's certainly something I'm pushing for a lot more where I am. And I would really like to see that a lot more. I'd love to see data engineers, data scientists, insights teams at the table across all manners of meetings, planning strategy sessions to a degree in lower level kind of sprint planning sessions and things like that. What are we working on? And what does the data team, the insights team need to be aware of, both for making sure that the right insights are being collected if we're building something new, and how we're going to go and use all of that as well. And exactly the same, how are product marketing then involved in at those discussions as well. So I really would like, and certainly from a product ops perspective, certainly something that we should be helping to facilitate as well, is to making sure that the right people have those seats at the table.
No,
Yeah.
100% agree. I was just thinking about maybe I should start a training program for analysts and data people to be in this kind of meetings so that they're not intimidated, that they know what is actually happening there. Also, like to understand for what kind of cues, because it takes some training. I mean, obviously, like when you start out in product, so for me, it's natural to go into sprint planning or to go into initial planning because I can know it from the other side. But I think for someone who does work completely differently, it's like, oh my God, that's a completely different world. So I encourage every data analyst to go in there, but also keep in mind, you might need 2 or 3 of them to get a feeling for the room and to know, okay, maybe this is something where I can contribute now and something like this.
Absolutely, but and I think as well, it's about kind of different levels of participation, and in my mind, if you're in that room, you have absolutely equal rights to participate as much or as little as possible. Again, if we're being a little bit stereotypical here, we will see those meetings predominantly led by product managers and or engineering managers. And there is the ongoing argument with designers about how much of a voice and seat they have at the table, and that's a whole other episode that we could record another time. But we should all be having those seats at the table, and if data people are in that room and want to and feel right to just kind of listen to that, to be aware of what's coming across their desks, in my mind, that's absolutely fine. If they want to kind of say, hey, look, do you know what? We have been seeing this trend that hasn't been mentioned so far. And, I want to bring it to the table. And actually, this actually is a counterpoint to the direction that we're going. Absolutely, that should be front and center as well. But at the moment, many teams, many businesses are not even opening the chair to these individuals to be at the table, let alone providing that space and the stage to voice what they have seen.
Or to turn it around, data teams, since they are not sales teams, are not really good in claiming this seat. I mean, you can also do the counter movement. So like if you're a very outgoing data person, obviously you create these connections. So you sit down with the product team, say, hey, should we go for lunch? And then you hear about these things, and then you hear, hey, can I just sit? Can you just invite me? So I just sit silently. I just would check things, and then you basically establish yourself in this kind of thing. So this is what I'm always trying when I talk to data teams. I was like, look, you have to find a way how you can become more proactive. So I know it's not in your natural, but it helps a lot. So unfortunately, the best skill that I say that data people can acquire is talking to people and understanding what their challenges are, what they're struggling with, and like to just become someone who's really good in understanding. I mean, in the end, it's like they become product managers to some degree, because product managers also are really good in understanding the problem of other people. So this helps, but obviously this is a skill that needs to develop over time. But you're completely right. So it should happen from both sides. So I would love to have more product people to say, hey, why don't you come around? So just sit here, and even if you don't say anything, at least you hear everything from the source. So you hear why we are discussing the whole thing. So 100%.
Yeah,
And
and I
Tanya, your
think
thoughts on this?
my gosh, like I could keep going for another hour, I think. But in product operations, you have a responsibility to be this conduit. You are the person that is uniquely positioned to make sure those connections happen, that the right people are in the right room, but you also set the standard. If nobody else is there setting that standard, it's up to you as a product ops person to set that standard, to have your eyes and ears open, to say, is this more than just a tick box exercise? Are we all on the same page? Because honestly, the reality is that if you don't, as an organization, if you don't figure out this data stuff, you're never going to meaningfully progress. You might get lucky, right? You might make nice bit of money once you find your target users and you can double down on that. But that is very finite. And unless you figure this out and you keep leveling up, there is a very close ceiling to what you can achieve.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
true.
agree. I think that I think that's the key interesting point, and I'm smiling slightly inside in that we've the whole episode here, which has been absolutely fantastic, which we are now out of time for today as well. But my finishing point is we've talked a huge amount of data and implementation of data and strategies on that, which to our product ops operators audience might feel, well, how much of this can I personally apply? And we've wrapped this up with actually, do you know what? You are the only person that can legitimately go to data people, product marketing, product managers, engineers, designers, and kind of go, hey guys, get your shit together and work the problem. All come to the meeting. You all have this voice. And if then we are not doing that already, we should be inviting these people to the meeting and making sure that we set that standard, that we expect the right amount of engagement from everybody, but bringing their insights to the decision-making process. And that absolutely is. Timo, you made a really great point, is that, you can have proactive people that will go out and make those connections, and you'll have more introvert people that will want to just sit there in the background. And that has happened very naturally, and that is absolutely great to happen. But Antonio, you're absolutely right. Uniquely, Product Ops is there to force that issue a little bit as well, which I think is absolutely correct. We are unfortunately out of time because Antonio said we could go on for another hour talking about all of this.
Easy.
But thank you, Timo, so much for everything that you have shared with us today, and would really like to thank you for your participating. And
Thank
please
you.
do connect with any of us on LinkedIn. And Timo, I
Yes.
think your newsletter will put a little link to your newsletter about here on the screen as
Yeah.
well. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. No, this was a great conversation. So I'm happy to come back. So
Oh,
if
yeah,
ever you want to.
Anytime.
Any time. We are getting to the point whereby we want to start rolling around and having
I
some of
know,
our
I
the
know, it
early
happens.
guests back on
Okay.
and speak about
I
updates.
I would love to join this club.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're looking forward to having you.
Okay.
So thank you everybody for watching today. Antonio and I will be back on the next episode of the Product Ops Cast. Thank you everybody. And